all night long. Fancy helping some faces, young and old, to warm the hearts when it's snowing and it's cold. You're gonna have to find a crew, it can't be anyone. They'll have to be there by your side and do what must be done. So go, man, you know that you have it night through day. The pain you will feel it to bring it on with the Archie County Band. Doubts come and some may never die. So I'll ask myself, should I stop before I try? No way, man, the stake it has been set. I'm all in, so there's nothing I'll regret. But time is ticking and there's so much that's going through my mind. Will I make it? Yes, I will. Our spirits are entwined. So let's get this show on the road. I'm here, I'll stay and I'll carry the load to bring it on with the Archie County Band. But hold on a second now, I'm starting to feel the strain. Was it a bicycle? What is wrong with my brain? Is it the end of me? No, I must still believe. So I'm still alive, you see. Heck yeah, now I'm on my way. But let's stay focused, there's still a job in hand that we must do.
Good evening, folks. You are very welcome to Bandido Talks. We are back. It's a Saturday evening. It's a windy evening. It's very windy outside. If you hear some unfamiliar noises, it is perhaps the wind. It's blowing a gale out there, but it ain't going to stop us tonight, folks. We are back for our second live show of the weekend. Of course, it is Saturday. And what does Saturday mean? For those of you who are familiar with Bandido Talks, you will know that every Saturday we do news on the tube. So we're going to go down through some standard media articles. We're going to get in underneath the headline. We're going to see what lessons we can extract from these media articles and perhaps apply these lessons to our own existence. So that's the deal tonight. News on the tube. We had a great show last night. If I do not say so myself, the Bandido was very happy with last night's show. We were talking all things education. The standard conventional education system, we were relating it to our Tuesday interview with Stevie J. It was a really good show. We got through so much in, what was it, about an hour and a half? I would highly encourage you to watch last night's show. If you are one of those young people who is confused and you don't know what to do with your existence, you're at school and you're thinking, should I do A-levels? Do I need to do A-levels? Should I go to university? Do I need a university degree to succeed at life? Well, perhaps last night's show might be of interest to you. Have a listen to it and, of course, come to your own conclusions. But we enjoyed last night's show. Of course, tonight it's all news on the tube. And, of course, if you do like our little news on the tube segment, if you find that you do get some value from it, then feel free to give the stream a thumbs up. Give us a little like. Charity is welcome. Of course, if you are joining us live here on the stream, I would encourage you to get into the live chat. Leave your comments, leave your insights. Let me know what you think about everything that we are going to discuss this evening. On topic, off topic, relevant or irrelevant. We will go through all the live chats at the end of the show. So get into the live chat. Let me know what you're thinking as the show progresses. Of course, if you are watching the show after the live event, then the same thing applies. Get down into the comments section. Let me know what you are thinking. And then finally, folks, if you like what we do here at Bandido Talks, if you find it useful, insightful, valuable, interesting in some way, then feel free to subscribe to the channel. As you know, at this stage, you have 3 live shows every week, Friday, Saturday and Sunday, 7 p.m. Irish time here on YouTube, always live. You always have your 3 live shows. We have an upload every Tuesday. It could be a Best Bits episode, which features highlights from the previous week's shows. It could be a guest interview. Of course, we had a guest interview this week with Mr. Stevie J. If you haven't watched the guest interview episode, it was our second guest here on the show. I would highly encourage you to go and watch that episode also. Stevie J, he was on form. He was dropping truth bombs all over the place with respect to business and the fundamentals of business. So check out the guest episode this Tuesday. And as I've said, every Tuesday you will always have an upload. It could be a guest interview. It could be a Best Bits upload. And then, of course, you have your YouTube shorts throughout the week, sprinkling highlights from the previous week's shows. And then, when the Bandido finally gets around to it, you will get some original music. Some original compositions will be coming your direction also. No covers. We don't want to get a copyright strike and get the YouTube channel banned. We can't have that. So it's all going to be original songs and compositions. Those will be coming soon. And so, with all of that out of the road, folks, let us get into tonight's show. Of course, it is news on the tube. We will be going into the Bandido's Google Chrome browser. We are going to see what stories are going to greet the Bandido, what stories are going to greet you watching as the live audience or the audience who is watching this upload after it has been posted. Of course, I have to tell you something funny. Last night's show, it was a really good show, as I said. Oh, to be educated. episode 28. And of course, last night's show was a Let's Reflect show, and we were talking all about our Tuesday guest interview. And of course, who was our guest this Tuesday? Mr. Stevie J. So of course, as I was doing the description up for that particular live stream, I went down into the description, I gave a little brief summary of what it was we were going to be talking about, and then I put the timestamps. I always put timestamps on our live shows or any upload that we have, so it makes it easier for you to navigate the video or the stream or whatever it is. And of course, as I was writing the description, putting in the timestamps, clearly YouTube has an AI algorithm or some sort of AI technology that is screening the video. It's having a look to see, well, what is actually in this video? Who are people that are mentioned in the video? So last night's live stream, we were talking all about Stevie J, our guest who was on our Tuesday upload. But of course, what happens? The Bandido goes back into the description today, just to make sure that all the links were working, all the timestamps were working. And I look at the description, and you can see this right now. I haven't changed anything. So I go into the description of last night's show. And in the description, there's this picture of a black dude called Stevie J. He's apparently an American music producer and a rapper. And so I'm looking at this in my description of last night's show. And I'm looking at this black dude, this American rapper and music producer called Stevie J. And I'm thinking, well, he didn't feature in last night's show. Why is he in the description of the video? And of course, I Googled Stevie J, and it turns out there's more than one person called Stevie J here on the planet. Let's just put it like that. And so here I was talking about Stevie J last night in the episode, referring to our guest interview. Of course, I did an interview with Stevie J, but not the American music producer or rap artist Stevie J. Not that Stevie J, but of course AI can be so retarded sometimes. Really retarded, I have to say. And so AI was clearly screening my video, the live stream last night. And it kept hearing me talk about Stevie J. And obviously, whenever I put into the description, Stevie J, it thought, oh, I know who the Bandido is talking about. He must be talking about the music producer and rapper over in America, the black Stevie J. Of course, I was not referring to that person at all, but that was AI having its moment of retardation. So if you go to last night's show, you will of course see in the description Stevie J, but not the Stevie J that I was talking about. Not the Stevie J that I interviewed. It's a different Stevie J. And so YouTube needs to get its shit together. Whatever AI was scanning the Bandido's live stream last night, well, what can we say? Unimpressive. It got the wrong Stevie J. Anyway, the joys of the YouTube AI algorithm. It is prone to retarded moments. And it had one of those moments last night. But anyway, I divulge. Tonight it's all about news on the tube. So we're going to go straight over to the Bandido's Google Chrome browser. We are going to see what stories are in the news. And we are, of course, going to get in underneath the headline and see what it is that we can learn from these common media articles. So let's have a look and see. Of course, I don't know what's going to greet me. That's the fun. We have to figure this out on the spot. So let's see. Let's have a look at our first article. It's from the BBC. The BBC normally allows me to read its articles. So this one should be fine. All right, is it going to ask me for cookies? I don't think it is. All right, so this is news item number 1 from the BBC. And the headline reads as follows. £1 million seized from Tate brothers will tackle violence. Well, this is going to be an interesting article. Let's read a few paragraphs. More than £1 million worth has been seized from controversial social media influencer Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan from bank accounts in Devon. And this will be used to combat violence against women and girls, police have said. Well, by Jesus, before we get any further into this article, they're going to perhaps use fiat money to try and combat violence. I wonder how they're going to do this. Let's read on and see what the article has to say for itself. It continues. It follows a December 2024 court ruling which found the brothers had not paid tax. Oh Lord, they didn't pay tax, folks. So the brothers had not paid tax on £21 million of revenue from their online business and had laundered money through bank accounts based in Devon. Unbelievable. Disgusting behaviour. Westminster Magistrates Court ruled Devon and Cornwall police could seize more than £2.9 million in money and assets, which included cryptocurrency. A spokesperson for the force has now said that £1 million earmarked for local projects will be used to, quote, battle violence against women and girls. All right, I think I've heard enough from this story. Okay, so here we have Andrew Tate. He actually featured a little bit in our episode last night. We have Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate. Of course, they are both brothers. And the article is telling us, this BBC article is telling us that the Tates have allegedly not been paying tax on their revenue. Now, apparently they made, according to the article, £21 million in revenue from their online business. And so the authorities have decided to seize £2.9 million of money and assets from the Tate brothers, and £1 million worth of this £2.9 million that they have seized is going to go back into local law enforcement, into the community to help fight violence against women and girls. All right. So, Andrew and Tristan Tate. As I said, Andrew featured on our episode last night when we were talking all things education. Of course, for those of you who are not familiar with Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan, these are businessmen. Andrew Tate is a former kickboxing world champion. He's a businessman. I know the article is calling him an influencer, and I suppose he is an influencer in the literal sense of the word, because he is influencing a whole bunch of young people in particular, particularly young men. So he does influence people. He is a businessman. He was a former world champion kickboxer. And he's actually involved in a fight tonight, believe it or not. He's fighting on Misfits, live on Rumble Premium. Of course, the Bandido does like to use Rumble. The Bandido uploads his videos to Rumble as well. He doesn't have Rumble Premium. He just has the standard Rumble account or subscription. But Andrew Tate, he will be fighting on Rumble Premium tonight as part of the Misfits boxing event. But anyway, Andrew Tate, he's an influencer. He influences lots of people, lots of young people, particularly young males. And he's a businessman. He's worth lots of money. He is, of course, Mr. Bugatti. That famous quote, "What colour is your Bugatti?" And as I said last night, many's a young student has recited that particular phrase back to their teacher. And their teachers are normally pissed off at this because they can feel their status dissolving right before them. As you've got this dude online, Andrew Tate, lots of money, He has all the chicks, all the women. He has all the perks of being rich. And of course, you've got young people see this type of an individual, and then they look at their teacher or their professor, who is broke and barely making ends meet and isn't particularly charismatic. And they kind of look at their teachers and professors who aren't charismatic, don't have lots of money, drive a Honda, and then they look at Andrew Tate, who has lots of money, millions of pounds worth of net worth. He has a Bugatti. He has lots of cars. He has lots of women. He has a big fancy house. And so you've got a whole bunch of young people, and they are sort of looking at the difference between their teachers and professors and Andrew Tate. And people like Andrew Tate. And understandably, you've got young people are sort of saying, well, Andrew Tate looks far more interesting than my teacher. And so this is where the influence is coming from. Hence why I suppose the article is calling him an influencer. Because he does influence a whole bunch of people. Not just young people, but young people is the demographic that makes up a substantial amount of his audience. And so, what can we learn from this? What can we learn from this article? Okay, so according to the BBC is saying, they are reporting that Andrew and his brother Tristan did not pay tax on revenue that they generated from their online business. According to the article, they generated £21 million of revenue for their online business, and they didn't pay tax. So, of course, here on Bandido Talks, we've been talking about Angela Rayner and Sir Keir Starmer. And remember, Angela Rayner didn't pay tax on her flat in Hove. And she, of course, at the time, was Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary. So the first thing that I think of is it is a little rich coming from the BBC, which is a state-funded media institution, criticising Andrew Tate for not paying tax, allegedly, when the Deputy Prime Minister 4 months ago, let's not forget, folks, only 4 months ago, the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, she was caught not paying tax. Even though she was the Housing Secretary, she wasn't paying tax on her flat in Hove. And so it is a little rich that we have a media institution that is funded by the government criticising someone for not paying tax, when Angela Rayner is now back in the government again, having also not paid tax. So that's one thing that we can look at. Here we have a citizen, Andrew Tate. He makes lots of money. And of course, the government wants its slice of the pie. $21 million £21 million of revenue on his online business. They are going to want their slice of the pie. They want their tax. And so they have taken matters into their own hands. The government has seized £2.9 million worth of assets and money, including cryptocurrency, from Andrew and Tristan Tate for having not paid tax. That's right, folks, the same tax money that leaves the country and funds foreign allies who are trying to fight a war. That's correct. And also taxes were also raised for you. That's right as well, folks. Remember that in the most recent budget, taxes were raised. I'm sure everybody's happy about that. Now, this is the thing. What can we learn from this article? So, we must ask ourselves, why is this money actually being seized? Well, the article is telling us that the money's being seized because, allegedly, tax has not been paid. And allegedly, the Tate brothers are engaged in money laundering. And so, They have now had their assets and some of their money seized, and £1 million worth of this money is going to go back into fighting violence against women and girls. Well, a very noble cause indeed, isn't it? And I wonder how they are going to do that. I wonder how they are going to take this money and use it to fight violence against women and girls. So the first thing that comes to my mind is, what type of violence are we talking about? Who is attacking the women and girls of the UK? Who is attacking? Who is being violent towards the women and girls of the UK? Because we can sort of smell the undercurrent here of this article. There's a link being drawn between Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate and violence against women and girls. There's a link being drawn there. In other words, the article is trying to give you the impression that the reason why there is so much violence against women and girls in the UK is because of the misogynistic influence of these influencers that are called Andrew and Tristan Tate. That is the underlying current of the article. It's trying to get you to believe that these monsters who are laundering money and not paying their taxes, they are involved somehow in an increase in violence against women and girls in the UK. And so let's go a step further. What else is the article implying then? The article is implying that the people who follow Andrew and Tristan Tate, in other words, the people who are being influenced by Andrew and Tristan Tate, the article is suggesting that these people who are being influenced are actually carrying out the violence against women and girls in the UK. That is the suggestion by the article. It's drawing that kind of a link. It's linking Andrew and Tristan Tate with violence against women and girls, meaning that the people who follow Andrew and Tristan Tate are actually carrying out this violence against women and girls. And so what the article is telling us is that £1 million of these £1 million, let's just say, of the £2.9 million that has been seized is going to be reinvested into local police and law enforcement and back into the community in order to combat the violence against women and girls that is actually being propagated by the supporters and fans of Andrew and Tristan Tate. That is the underlying sentiment of the article. And so I wonder what's going to happen. What is going to happen here? How is this 1 million going to actually be used to practically carry out something useful? Because we must first ask, folks, this is the question we must ask. Who is attacking and being violent against the women and girls of the UK? It is the third time I have repeated this, I believe. Now, if you were to follow the logic of the article would lead you to believe that it is the young British men in particular, because those are the people who are most influenced by Andrew and Tristan Tate. So the article is perhaps suggesting that it is the young British men who are spearheading this campaign of violence against women and girls. That's the problem. It's the young British males. And of course, we will remember, folks, there was a documentary released very recently on Netflix. What was it called? Oh gosh, I can't remember. Let me look this up. I can't remember what it was called, but it's related to this story. Let me look and see. It won't take me long to figure this out. So documentary, Netflix, documentary, what's it called? Let's have a look and see. Netflix documentary about, we'll type in misogyny. Let's have a look and see. Adolescence, that's the one I'm after. Okay. So, there was a recent Netflix documentary called Adolescence. Now, the Bandido did not watch this documentary because he couldn't be arsed. He could kind of get the gist of it from the advertisements that he was receiving on YouTube about this documentary. So whenever I would watch YouTube, an ad would pop up about adolescence. And what was the general idea behind this Netflix documentary called Adolescence? The general idea was online social media influencers like Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate are literally giving birth to a whole bunch of misogynistic young men who are carrying out acts of violence against women and girls in the UK. That's what the documentary was basically about. It was about tackling online misogyny, online hatred against women, and this online misogyny is then manifesting in the real world through violence, where young British males are now attacking women and girls here in the UK. That's the underlying current of Adolescence, this Netflix documentary. Now, why am I bringing this up? Well, it's related to Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate, because when you have that knowledge and then you read this article, it's very clear the link that is being drawn. The link that is being drawn here, and I will repeat it again, is the people who are being influenced by Andrew and Tristan Tate. It is those individuals, the young British males, that are carrying out the acts of violence against women and girls in the UK. And this is what the big push is that the article is telling us. There's a big push on to try and stamp out online misogyny. Why? Because online misogyny is apparently leading to real life acts of violence against women and girls. Apparently that's what's happening. And the culprits are the young British males. Those are the culprits. So that's perhaps what the article is trying to get across to us. I'm sure if I read down through the article, it would perhaps give me something along those lines. And so here we have, apparently Andrew and Tristan Tate haven't been paying tax, and they've been money laundering according to the BBC. And so the government has now decided to seize some of their money and their assets, £2.9 million. And then of that £2.9 million, £1 million is going to be used to try and combat violence against women and girls in the UK. Because the supporters of Andrew and Tristan Tate, it is those individuals who are the perpetrators of this violence. And so as a result, we need to invest all of this money into trying to stop the young British males from enacting or carrying out acts of violence against women and girls here in the UK. Okay, so let's try to be professional about this in our analysis. Let's try to be professional. Do we really think that young British men are the problem? Do we really think that it is the young British men, teenagers and young men in their early 20s? Do we really think it is the British teenagers and the young British men that are carrying out these violent acts against women and girls in the UK? Is that what we really think is happening? I want you to think of it in your own local area. Think about it, folks. When there is crime in your own local area, in the UK, if you are watching from the UK, or perhaps even elsewhere in Europe or in the United States of America. Think about it. But let's just focus on the UK. So do we really think that it is the young British males that are carrying out these acts of violence against women and girls in the UK? That this is the problematic group? Think about it. Now, some people might say the following, and this is perhaps speculation. It may be true, it may not be true, but word on the street has it that some people are saying that the acts of violence against women and girls in the UK is not coming from the young British males. It's actually coming from a different group of people. That group of people being what we are going to call our international friends. You know, our international friends that come over to the UK seeking asylum, fleeing war-torn countries, our international friends. There would be some people that would say that the actual main cause of violence against women and girls in the UK is actually coming from our international friends that are coming into the country through various modes of transport, often known as dinghies. That's a popular mode of transport that our international friends will use to try and come into the UK. And there are some people in the population would say that because there is so much diversity within the UK, you've got so many different cultures, people coming from far-flung lands who don't perhaps understand British customs. They don't perhaps understand the law in this neck of the woods. Some people would say that it is our international friends who are presenting a greater risk to the women and girls in the UK, a violent risk, because there have been some reports of international friends getting together in their big international friend group and targeting women and girls. Some people would also say that. And so we have these two different ways of looking at this story. One way we could look at this story is the people who are being influenced by Andrew and Tristan Tate, the young British teenagers and the young British men. They are the problem. They are the ones who are perpetrating all of this violence. They are generating all this violence against women and girls. They are being filled full of toxic, misogynistic ideology from Andrew and Tristan Tate. And then they are going out into the real world, having consumed the online content from Andrew and Tristan Tate. And they are then saying, I'm going to violently assault women and attack them. So that's one way you could look at it. The other way you could look at this particular situation with respect to violence against women and girls in the UK is that we have some international friends who have entered the country with different customs, different culture, a different way of life. And perhaps from the neck of the woods that they come from, the part of the world where they were brought up in, maybe they see the law a little bit differently. And perhaps these individuals who are now coming into the country in greater numbers, maybe it is these individuals who are actually posing the greatest risk of violence towards women and girls in the UK. That's another way to look at it. And so it is up to you folks, the viewers of Bandido Talks, to figure out, is the BBC telling the truth? Of course, this is the BBC, who recently, I don't want you to forget, did a somewhat deceptive edit of Donald Trump's speech back in 2021. Remember our mate Mr. Davies? Remember that with the BBC? The deceptive edit of the Trump speech, giving the impression that Donald Trump was inciting violence and telling his protesters to raid or essentially launch an attack on the White House. Remember that, folks? It only happened about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And the BBC was caught with its pants down around where its ankles are. And the BBC in this panorama documentary was coming out and giving the impression to the viewing public that Donald Trump was inciting violence. And of course, in 2025, it has been revealed that, actually, there was a bit of deceptive editing. We took a part of the speech at the beginning and a part of the speech at the end, and we blended them together in one smooth segment to give the impression that Donald Trump was asking his supporters to engage in a violent protest. Of course, the BBC was caught being dishonest. And so here we have the same BBC talking about Andrew and Tristan Tate. They're laundering money. They're evading taxes. They've had their assets now seized. £2.9 million worth of assets. And of course, £1 million of this is going to go back in to the United Kingdom to fight violence against women and girls. Because the reason why there's so much violence in the UK at the moment towards women and girls is because the young British males are so full of misogynistic rhetoric. Their brains have been contaminated by Andrew and Tristan Tate because, of course, Andrew and Tristan Tate's message, their message, of course, is to go out and beat women and assault them and be violent. That's what their message is, of course. Their message is, yes, you must go out and you must be violent towards women. That's the message of Andrew and Tristan Tate. That's what the BBC is trying to tell us. Of course, for anybody who has actually watched some of the content from Andrew and Tristan Tate, for anyone who has just tried to be objective and said, okay, I'm hearing a lot about Andrew Tate. I'm hearing a lot about his brother Tristan. Let's be fair. Let's give them a shot. I'm hearing a lot from the BBC. I'm hearing a lot from the British government. The BBC seems to have a bee in its bonnet with respect to Andrew Tate. So let's be fair. We've got the BBC's side of the story. How about we go straight to the source and we actually watch some of Andrew Tate's content? Let's watch it and see. Let's watch it with an open mind and see what the message actually is. And of course, if anybody has actually done that, what you will realise is, of course, the vast majority of comments that Andrew Tate makes, they are tongue-in-cheek, they are humorous. When he is talking about women, when he's talking about misogynistic things, it's humour. Think of it like a comedian. When a comedian gets up on stage and makes a joke, it could be a racist joke, it could be a misogynistic joke, it could be a homophobic joke. When a comedian gets up on stage, nobody has a problem because we have context surrounding the commentary. And that's fine. People go and watch comedians because it's funny. It's funny when people take topics, make jokes about them. That's what comedians do. Topics that normally people would be too afraid to talk about, but the comedian takes the topic, turns it into a joke, turns it into a humorous circumstance, and people find it funny. because they themselves wouldn't come out and say this. So if you watch any of Andrew Tate's content, you will see that there's a lot of humour. There is a lot of joking. A lot of it is tongue-in-cheek. That's the first thing. The second thing is the actual core message is not as misogynistic as you may think. What does Andrew Tate preach? He says go to the gym. Get big and strong. Be able to defend yourself. Be physically capable. Nothing wrong with that. What else does he say? You need to get rich and wealthy. Nothing wrong with that. Everybody wants more moolah. It makes sense. You want to become rich, wealthy, and influential. Nothing wrong with that. You want to have the ability to be able to move when you want to move. You want to have the financial resources to be able to do that. You want to have the network to be able to move to a different location if you need to move. We've talked about this before. Getting ourselves in optimal circumstances so that if our area or our community starts to deteriorate because there's too much violence against women and girls and against everybody in the community, you need to have the ability to move. What does Andrew Tate preach? You need to become essentially financially very capable. You need to be able to have enough financial muscle so that if you need to move, you can move. You need to have a good network of individuals who you can trust. These are things that Andrew Tate would talk about. And if you have an open mind and you actually run the experiment fairly, because that's what we are supposed to do here, folks. We're trying to take media articles and analyse them professionally. Look at both sides. We can see what the BBC is saying. The BBC is giving us the impression Andrew Tate, Tristan Tate, they are money laundering. They are avoiding paying tax on their income. They are inspiring or influencing young British males to carry out violence against women and girls. The reason why these young British males who follow Andrew Tate, the reason why they are doing this is because, of course, Andrew Tate is extremely misogynistic, according to the BBC. And this online misogyny is manifesting in the real world as violence against women and girls. And the perpetrators of the violence are Andrew Tate's fans and Tristan Tate's fans, the young British males, the teenagers, the young British men. They are the ones who are carrying out this violence. And of course, whenever we bring into the equation the adolescence documentary on Netflix, this is exactly the type of message that Netflix and the BBC and these big state-funded institutions are trying to tell us. They are trying to tell us, Andrew and Tristan Tate, they are dangerous humans. They are fueling the young generation with this disgusting, misogynistic rhetoric and ideology, and it's causing the younger generation's minds to become contaminated minds, polluted minds. And then, of course, the young British males are then going out into the public and they are abusing and violently assaulting or attacking or verbally abusing women and girls. And so what's happening? Andrew Tate has had nearly £3 million of his money and assets seized. £1 million worth of this is going to go back into the community to fight violence against women and girls. This is the side of the BBC. This is what the BBC is saying. And the reason why £1 million worth of this money that has been seized from Andrew Tate is going back into the community is because the money is supposed to be used to combat this online misogyny from Andrew Tate and to try and essentially extinguish this type of ideology in the minds of the young British males. That's the side of the BBC. In other words, the BBC is saying that the problem, the reason why there is so much violence against women and girls is because of Andrew Tate, and it is because of Tristan Tate. They are the problem. And so we need to cut off the head of the snake. We need to go after them. We need to seize their money. We then need to use the money that we seize from them and put it back into the community to try and tackle this violence against women and girls that they are initiating by influencing their supporters to be violent against women and girls. That's the side of the BBC. Okay, fair enough. We analyse that. We are going to be professional, so we analyse that. That's fine. But what we must also do, and this is what we always do here on Bandido Talks, we are professional in our analysis of any news article. So to be professional, we need to look at the other side of the equation. Even if you don't want to look at the other side of the equation, you need to do it. You need to run the experiment fairly. And how do you do that? Well, what you need to do is you need to spend some time consuming Andrew Tate's content, because you don't want to just take the BBC's word for it. Oh, why not, says you. Have you not been listening to tonight's show? What did I already say? The BBC in the last 4 or 5 weeks has literally been caught red-handed lying to the public. There were resignations at the top level of the BBC. Tim Davie had to resign, the director of the BBC, because the BBC was caught lying about the deceptive edit of the Donald Trump speech, trying to paint Donald Trump in a certain light, trying to make it out that Donald Trump was influencing his supporters and telling his supporters to go and storm the White House and engage in a violent protest, when he did nothing of the sort. And so when you have a media outlet like the BBC, and when you have a media outlet like the BBC with a track record like this, you should be suspicious and skeptical about anything that comes out of the BBC, because you literally have evidence in the last 4 to 5 weeks of essentially the deception of the BBC. You have that evidence. It should be fresh in your mind. And that doesn't mean you have to disregard everything that comes from the BBC. But what it means is, if you are a professional and you're trying to analyze things as fairly as possible, you have to consider that in your analysis. You have to consider the fact that the BBC has just been caught in a highly deceptive act with the Donald Trump speech. They aired this Panorama documentary, and they've had to come out and apologize. People have had to resign. In other words, people have been fired. Outright deception. And so when you have a track record like that, you should have some suspicion, some skepticism about what it is that you're reading. So that's fine. We understand the BBC's angle. Now we need to go to the source. And the source is Andrew and Tristan Tate. You need to go to their own interviews, their own podcast episodes. You need to watch their own channel. Watch their own content. Consume it in all of its context. If this is something that you are interested in, and I know a lot of people are interested in Andrew and Tristan Tate, especially here in the UK. I do speak with young people. I speak with young people's parents. And they are very alarmed by Andrew and Tristan Tate. They think they are the devil, reincarnated. But you see, what happens? Parents who are fearful that their children are consuming Andrew Tate's content, what do these parents not do? What they don't do is they don't actually take the time to actually consume Andrew Tate's content. They don't run the experiment fairly. They take one side of the story. They take the mainstream media narrative of Andrew Tate as he is portrayed. They take that narrative and they never run the experiment fairly. And so what happens when you don't run an experiment fairly? You are prone to making mistakes in your analysis. And so what we want to do, folks, is take the BBC's side of this argument. Take it on board. Let it filter through your mind and say, okay, I know where the BBC stands on Andrew and Tristan Tate. And if you think this is a big enough issue for you, because maybe you are a parent and maybe you have young kids who are consuming Andrew Tate's content. Okay, if you're in that position and this is a big enough deal to you and you're feeling alarmed by the misogynistic rhetoric, according to the BBC, that's coming out of Andrew Tate's content and his own mouth. Okay. Well, here's the lesson from this story, folks. Don't just take one side and deliberately ignore the other. What you should do is you should analyze this article like a professional, which means you go down through the article, you look at everything that it's saying, and then what do? You go to the source, which is Andrew and Tristan Tate. And if it's a big enough deal to you, you will spend the time going down through their content. Because you want to figure out, at the end of the day, are these people, are Andrew and Tristan Tate the devil reincarnated? Or are they actually delivering a message that could be interpreted in a positive sense? The only way you're going to be able to figure this out is if you take both sides of the argument. You've got the argument here from the BBC, and then you would have to get the argument from Andrew and Tristan Tate. Once you do that, once you then go and consume Andrew and Tristan Tate's content, now you're in a position to deliver your verdict. But you see, if you don't actually go and get the other side of the story, you are in no position to come to any conclusion because you only have one side of the story. We know this, folks. If you have young kids and your young kids have got into an argument, the first kid that comes to you, do you just blindly take his side of the argument and never get the other side of the argument from the other kid? Of course you don't. That would be stupid. Because why would it be stupid? Well, what happens if the first kid who comes to you is telling a few porky pies for his own self-interest? And so to be fair in a situation like that, if you've got two of your kids and they've been arguing and bickering and fighting, and one of your kids actually gets to you first and gives you their version of events, what would you do as a parent? You would say, okay, little Johnny, okay, I hear you out. I've got your side of the argument. But now I'm going to go and talk to Billy. And then what does Johnny do? No, don't do that. No, believe me. He tries to make his case. He tries to dissuade you from going and getting little Billy's side of the argument. I wonder why. And so this is the thing. If you're in a situation like that as a parent, obviously, what you're going to do is you're going to get both sides of the story. That's the first thing you're going to do, because you need to be fair. It is unfair to take the first child's version of events and just blindly believe that without getting the other child's version of the same events. And so it's the same thing here. If you get an article from the BBC, that's fine. You can read the article. You can consume its content. But when we are dealing with something like this, where the article is clearly engaging in an attack on Andrew and Tristan Tate, it's painting them in a negative light. Same with the Adolescence documentary on Netflix. Clearly, they are drawing a link. The BBC, with this article, the Adolescence Netflix documentary, they are clearly drawing a link between Andrew Tate and the people who Andrew Tate influences and violence against women and girls. So the link that is being drawn is that Andrew Tate's supporters and fans, they are the ones, the young British males, they are the ones who are carrying out the acts of violence against women and girls in the UK. Okay. So, okay, you've got that side of the argument. Great. Now, you know what you need to do? Now you need to go and get Andrew and Tristan Tate's side of the argument. And listen to them. Because if you are a concerned parent, if this is concerning to you, if you find that if this is sort of an alarming set of circumstances for you as a parent, you think that your children are being influenced by some monster online, okay. If that's what you think, then how about you go and look at the monster's content? There's plenty of it online. Andrew Tate has a copious amount of long-form podcast interviews. They go for 2 hours, 3 hours. All you have to do is sit down and listen to Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate in context in a long-form interview or podcast format. And just listen to them. Spend a bit of time, listen to their message, try to deduce when they are joking, when they are saying things for comedic effect, for some sort of a humorous effect. And then try to deduce when they are actually talking seriously. Try to figure out what is their actual message. That's what you should do to run the experiment fairly, to be fair. And that's the big lesson from this article. That's what you want to do. We have the BBC's side of events. We also want to get Andrew and Tristan Tate's side of the story. How do you do that? They are all over social media. Just go. The thing that I would say, the best thing to do is to always watch and listen to, quote, controversial people in a long-form context. What do I mean by that? Don't just listen to a 1-minute clip. That's stupid. That's silly. Because anybody can sound extreme or racist or homophobic or misogynistic or Islamophobic. Anybody can sound extreme or dangerous or whatever word you want to use when you clip them out of context into 30 seconds or 60 seconds. Don't do that. Don't be a dipshit. Don't be a dipshit. The best thing to do is to find Andrew and Tristan Tate talking in a long format, in a format where you have 60 minutes, not 60 seconds, 120 minutes, not 30 seconds. Watch and listen to them across a full podcast episode. And then, when you do this multiple times and you start to get a feel for their message, you start to get a feel for when there is things that are being said for comedic effect, when you start to get a feel for things that are actually representative of their core message, then you will be in a position to compare and contrast. Then you can compare the BBC's side of events with Andrew and Tristan Tate's side of the story. Now you are in a position to come to a conclusion because now you are an informed individual. You've went and checked out Andrew and Tristan Tate in a long form context. Not a short form context, because it's very easy to clip people out of context. That goes without saying. And so that would be the big lesson, folks. And this is the thing. When the Bandido, because the Bandido, back in, 2023, 2022, 2023, I remember, I use YouTube. I don't watch television. I use YouTube in order to find interviews and pieces of content that are interesting to me, that are relevant to my own interests. And so back in 2022, 2023, Andrew Tate kept coming up on my YouTube feed. I didn't know who he was. I just kept seeing his face come up over and over again on my YouTube feed. And initially I just ignored any of this content because I was thinking, who the fuck is this guy? Who is Andrew Tate? And then I clicked into a YouTube short and he was kind of off on one of his rants. It was like 20 or 30 seconds. And I sort of listened to it and went, I don't know who this person is. I'm just not interested. And so he kept coming up. And then I started to see in the mainstream media started to heavily criticize Andrew Tate. Heavily criticize him. Then he got banned from the social media platforms. And so that caught my attention. Because remember, we were coming out of COVID. And so I started to see him getting banned on social media. And he started to get slandered in the press. And so I thought, hold on, Andrew Tate, that name sounds familiar. And then I went, oh, that's the guy that keeps coming up on my YouTube feed. And so I saw all of this slandering in the mainstream media. I had seen that he was banned from YouTube, banned from all social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. And so I thought, well, this is interesting. What is this dude's deal? What's he up to? So then I started to watch some of his content to see, well, okay, well, what's the big deal? So I got the mainstream media's side of the story. I could see that they thought he was really dangerous. He had this misogynistic rhetoric. He was very violent. He was encouraging violence among his supporters, encouraging his supporters to be misogynistic, to hate on women. This is all the stuff I was hearing. I was hearing that he was homophobic, all this sort of stuff. He didn't believe in depression. Oh, Lord God, he didn't believe in depression. They really didn't like that one. So I start to hear all of these things. And so I say, okay, my interest has been piqued. I'm going to go and listen to Andrew Tate in his own words, because I'm hearing a lot of people talk about him and try to relay his message to me. How about I just go straight to the source and I hear his own message from him, from his own mouth? And so that's what I started to do. I thought I'll run the experiment fairly. He's coming up a lot in common media. He's coming up on my YouTube feed. So let's listen to the man in his own words. So what did I do? I started to listen to Andrew Tate in a long form context. 2-hour podcast episodes. And so I listened to a few of these. And after basically the second podcast, I was able to come to the conclusion, okay, this is very clear. So literally 2 podcasts. I listened to the first podcast and went, pretty interesting character. You know, that was a good podcast, but let's do another one just to make sure that, you know, we want to have a large enough sample size of podcasts. So I listened to a second podcast with Andrew Tate. And after the second podcast, I had heard enough. I could clearly see that all of these clips of Andrew Tate, these 20-second, 30-second clips, they were clipped out of context. What he was saying was just a joke. It was for comedic effect. It was clipped out of context and it was plastered over social media. And of course, the mainstream media leapt on top of these and tried to paint Andrew Tate in a certain light. Just like the BBC tried to paint Donald Trump and his speech in a certain light. And so whenever I actually went to the source, in other words, I actually went to Andrew Tate's content, I realized very quickly, Lord God Almighty, okay, we've got this guy, he's a kickboxing world champion. He's very successful in life. He's lived a very interesting life, a very unique existence. He's traveled a lot. He has a lot of experience. He's made a lot of money. He's an interesting guy. He has interesting insights about how the world works. And so I started to listen and I started to get his side of the story. And so then what happened? I was now in a better position to make a judgment on Andrew Tate. And Tristan Tate too, having listened to some of the interviews with Tristan. Tristan doesn't do as many interviews, but I did go and try to find some of his interviews as well, because he always gets thrown into the same discussion with Andrew. So I watch both of them in a long form context. And so having got the BBC and mainstream media's verdict of them, I then get their side of the story. And now I'm in a position to make an informed conclusion. And so that's the position we want to get ourselves in, folks. When people are clipped out of context, when people are being portrayed as a certain way through media, the best thing to do, folks, the best thing to do is to get both sides. You can listen to the mainstream media if you want to, but please bear in mind that let's just say on numerous occasions, the mainstream media, the BBC, the Guardian, the Sunday World, whatever the fuck you want to talk about in terms of mainstream media, whoever you want to refer to, they have all been caught at various times being deceptive in their reporting. And so that's fine. We need to bear that in mind. We've talked about this before on the show. We need to run background checks on our sources of information. We need to see what their track record is like when it comes to presenting the facts of reality honestly. And so if a media outlet has a poor track record, in other words, if a media outlet has been caught multiple times being deceptive or portraying people in a certain light that isn't representative of who it is that they are, then we need to factor that into our analysis when we are considering what it is that that particular media outlet is actually saying. And so that's fine. We always run a background check on our sources of information. So we take the information. That's okay. That's one side of the story. The logical thing to do, folks, is to go and get, in this case, Andrew and Tristan Tate in their own words. Go watch them in a long-form context. And now you're in a position to cast judgment over who is being most accurate. Is it the BBC in this case, and Netflix with their adolescence documentary? Or is it Andrew and Tristan Tate in their own words? So, that would be the lesson from tonight's story on Andrew and Tristan Tate. They've had their assets and money seized, and apparently a portion of that money, £1 million, is going to be reinvested into fighting violence against women and girls in the UK. I've tried to lay it out as best as I can for you. The Bandido has done his homework. I have listened to the mainstream media and its coverage of Andrew and Tristan Tate. I have also went and listened to Andrew and Tristan Tate in their own words. So I now am in a position to come to a conclusion about who is actually representing the facts of reality most accurately. The question is, are you in that same position? Because if you are one of these people who are criticizing Andrew and Tristan Tate for being misogynistic pigs and the devil's worshippers reincarnated, and you have not actually spent the time to consume some of their content in a long-form context, then you are a dipshit, and you deserve to be deceived. You deserve to be exploited by media outlets and other people. Because if you are going to go through this life taking only one side of the story and deliberately ignoring the other side of the story, you deserve to be exploited. You deserve to make mistakes. You deserve to make errors. And so that's what we want to do. We always want to get both sides of the story. I've done it. Have you? And because I've done it, I can put this media article into context because I now know what it's referring to. I understand the link that it's trying to draw. But whenever I actually go to the source, Andrew and Tristan Tate, there's a direct contradiction between Andrew and Tristan Tate's side of the story and how they are being portrayed by the BBC and other media outlets. And again, what else factors into my analysis? Well, what is the credibility of the mainstream media source that I am consuming? And I am also aware that mainstream media sources have a tendency to tell porky pies and not portray people in the actual accurate light that they should be portrayed in. Cue Donald Trump's speech. And the reason why I keep mentioning Donald Trump's speech, the deceptive edit, is because it literally happened so recently. I'm trying to not allow you to forget this because it's very important. We talk about this all the time. And I'm repeating myself. Running a background check on your sources of information. I don't want you to forget that. You have to assess the credibility of your source of information, its reputation for telling the truth. And when it does get something wrong, when one of your sources of information does get the facts of reality wrong, are they humble? Do they have humility to hold their hands up and say, oh, my apologies, I inaccurately reported. And I'm now going to take measures to ensure that this doesn't happen again. And then you watch and see, is the media outlet going to stay to its word? And this is the thing. I can see the contradiction. There's a contradiction between how the mainstream media articles, like the BBC, are portraying Andrew and Tristan Tate. Because when I listen to them in their own words, I can very easily hear and see that the very clips that the BBC and these other media articles are using to support their claim that Andrew and Tristan Tate are misogynistic pigs and they are influencing the young generation of British males and British people around the world and young people around the world to engage in violence against women and girls and to hate women. I can now see that portrayal of Andrew and Tristan Tate is at odds with what I'm seeing and hearing. Because when I listen to their message, I can see when comments are being made that have comedic undertones, or they're just outright jokes, and they're being clipped out of context. And these clips are then being used as evidence to convince you that they are misogynistic pigs and dangerous to the young men and the young people here in the UK and elsewhere in the world. But because I've got both sides of the story, I can now come to a well-informed conclusion. And what's my conclusion? Well, that's the thing. I can see the humour and the comedic effect in a lot of the things that Andrew and Tristan Tate say. They also have a general message of positivity when you actually listen to them. As a young man, become competent, become physically strong, physically capable, be healthy. Get your financial situation in order. You need to make sure that you are capable financially so that you can move, or you can adjust, or you can be adaptable. What's wrong with that? At its core, what is wrong with that? But of course, if you never get the other side of the story, you won't realize that there's actually a message that's being relayed, a message of get physically strong, get healthy, get competent, get financially secure. Grow your network. Collaborate with people who have your best interests at heart. Make sure that the people that you have around you are trustworthy. Don't have liabilities around you. Form a brotherhood. Get your brothers together. Get your little gang together. Your group of mates. Try to strive for excellence. Individual excellence. Be as competent as you can. Because the more competent you are, the more useful you can be to other people. These are some of the messages that come out of Andrew and Tristan Tate's content. But of course, if you're just going by one side of the story, you won't even realize that this is lying here on the other side. And so as a result, you aren't fully informed. And when you are not fully informed, you are liable to be exploited by other individuals or institutions. And you don't want to be in a position where you can be exploited. So that's the lesson from this story. Remember, folks, just like if you're a parent and your two kids have been in a brawl, you always get both sides of the story. It's the same thing here. When you read something in the media, when the media is criticizing someone, we had this with DJ Carey, one of our episodes. I can't remember what episode it was, but it was all about DJ Carey's cancer scam. And we could see how the media was absolutely hammering DJ. And DJ got sentenced to like 5.5 years in prison for essentially lying. Ridiculous. And the media is hammering him. Now, I'm not saying that DJ Carey is not a scammer. He is a scammer. And he is a piece of shit. But he's not a criminal. He just lied and deceived his way into getting people to give him money willingly. He didn't force people to give him money. He didn't hold a gun to their head. He didn't hold a knife to their throat. He just deceived people into giving him money willingly. They willingly gave him money. Nothing illegal about that. He was just a deceptive piece of shit. But that's okay. There are deceptive pieces of shit all around us. That doesn't make them criminals. It just makes them not particularly admirable humans. So how the media was kind of portraying DJ Carey as this outright criminal, disgusting individual, 5.5 years in prison. It's like, okay, I get that side of the story, but now let's look at the other side. Does DJ Carey deserve 5.5 years in prison? Let's have a look at that side. Is he actually a criminal? And you know, it's something similar here. The general underlying strategy is the same. You analyze both sides. When you see someone in the media who's being heavily criticized, the first thing that you should think is, right, how about I go listen to this person in their own words? Because I have the BBC and other media articles telling me what to think about this person. Second-hand information. Okay, how about I go listen to this person and watch them? Watch their content. Listen to what it is they have to say in their own words. Ideally, in a long-form context. That's what we should do. Because if this is an issue that means enough to us, obviously, if you don't give a shit about Andrew and Tristan Tate, and you're thinking, I don't care about any of this, can we analyze a different news article? That's okay. You don't have to do anything. But there are a whole bunch of people who are very alarmed by the rhetoric of Andrew and Tristan Tate. And if you are one of those people, if you are a parent who is worried for your little Johnny and your little Billy, because you think that they are being influenced in a negative sense by Andrew and Tristan Tate, then you need to spend the time getting the other side of the story, because you could be making a mistake. Because if you only take one side of the story, you could be getting deceived. If you blindly believe one side of the story, you could get exploited. And you could have an inaccurate worldview. And so then as a result, you start to make mistakes and errors. Get both sides of the story. That is the moral or the lesson that we take away from tonight's show. Always get both sides, because only then are you in a position to actually cast an accurate judgment over this entire situation. So anyway, goodness gracious, we've been going for an hour and 24 minutes. It looks like we're only going to get through one story tonight, folks. We're only going to get through one story tonight. Old Andrew and Tristan Tate. They've taken up the entire show. But I think it's a valuable discussion, because sometimes we can be tricked and deceived into only believing one side of a story. And it's always important to remember not to do that. You want to be as informed as possible. So anyway, the Bandido's been rambling. But I think it is now time to see what you guys are saying about tonight's show. Let's get over to the live chats and see if you have anything to comment upon with respect to tonight's show? It looks like the stream is functioning just fine. I have to just keep a check on our stream. Of course, we've had some audio difficulties over the last few weeks. Some audio gremlins in the stream. Looks like everything's going according to plan tonight. Let's have a look and see what you guys are saying. Let's have a look and see. Is there anybody in the live chat? We had one person in the live chat last night. Let's have a look and see. It looks like we've got 2 people in the live chat. We've got 2 live commenters. Let's get into the live chats. Let's see what our live commenters are talking about with respect to our story tonight. We'll go from top to bottom. Our first commenter in the live chat is Jernman. Jernman is back in the live chat. Let's see what Jernman is saying. He says the following. Create a problem, then blame someone else. Very classy. Will the Goyim join the dots? Well, Jernman's really pulling no punches tonight. So he says, create a problem, then blame someone else. Very classy. Will the Goyim join the dots? All right, what is Jernman getting at here? We're going to try and interpret this live chat. So he says, create a problem, then blame someone else. So we did talk earlier in tonight's show about, and I'm just going to assume what Jernman is talking about here. So let's do some speculation on this comment. Earlier in our show, we talked about who is actually being violent towards the women and girls here in the UK. And we sort of had 2 ways to look at this. We could say, number one, perhaps it is the young supporters of Andrew and Tristan Tate. Maybe the misogynistic rhetoric that's coming from Andrew and Tristan Tate's online content is causing their young fans to go out into the real world and be violent towards women. We see this in the BBC's article that we've analysed tonight, this link that's being drawn between Andrew and Tristan Tate and violence against women. And we also see it in the Netflix documentary Adolescence, that the problem is the young British males. They are the problem. They are the people who are responsible for this violence against women and girls in the UK. So that's one way to look at it. The other way that we looked at it was perhaps there have been some rumblings on the street. Some people have said that our international friends that are coming over in dinghies, oftentimes, across the water, our international friends who have different customs, different cultures, different ways of living, certain privileges here that the law gives them because they are coming from a different country. Perhaps we could say another way to look at this violence against women and girls in the UK, it has nothing to do with the young British males, but it has actually a lot to do with our international friends who are flooding into the country. And these international friends of ours, they have all of these different worldviews and all of this multiculturalism, all of this diversity that's now engulfing the UK. Is giving rise to very different worldviews. And perhaps our international friends have a different way of looking at women and girls. And perhaps the violence is actually coming from this section of the population. Not the local British folks, but actually from the international friends who are coming into the country with different ideologies, different worldviews, different ways of treating women and girls according to their religious beliefs, according to their own culture. Perhaps that's another way to look at the problem against violence, or with violence against women and girls. So we looked at these 2 potential theories as to what is happening. And so Jernman is saying, create a problem, then blame someone else. So is Journman, our live chatter, is he getting at this idea that the problem is actually the international friends who are coming over in large numbers, forming big ethnic groups, big ethnic enclaves, and it is those individuals who are committing the violent acts against women and girls? And then, in order to distract the public from the real cause, what is then happening is Andrew and Tristan Tate and the followers of Andrew and Tristan Tate are being blamed for this violence against women and girls in the UK, when it's actually to do with something completely different. Maybe that's what Journman is getting at. Maybe Journman is getting at the fact that Andrew and Tristan Tate are being thrown under the bus, and their supporters are being thrown under the bus. The young British men, they are being thrown under the bus in order to distract from the real problem. The real problem being there are a whole bunch of international friends who have been allowed to enter the United Kingdom, and because they are now entering at an unprecedented rate and number, they are forming large groups within the United Kingdom, and these large groups of our international friends are then engaging in violent acts against women and girls across the country. And to distract the public from this, the media is then reporting and saying, well, actually the problem is the young British males. And the young British males are being influenced by who? Andrew and Tristan Tate. So the real problem is the online misogyny that's coming from Andrew and Tristan Tate. So maybe that's what Journman is getting at. Journman is trying to say that the problem that has been created is actually taking place in a different part of the population, but someone else is being blamed for it. Journman then says very classy, will the Goyim join the dots? The Goyim. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with the word Goyim, Goyim is another word for, let's just say it's a synonym for peons. The peons, the peon public, the peasant public, the peons and the peasants, will they cop on? Will they realize what is actually happening here? Perhaps that's what Journman is saying. Will the Goyim, will the peasants, will the peons in the population, will they actually join the dots? Will they actually realize what is happening? Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate are being thrown under the bus. They are being used as, let's just say, a scapegoat. They are being used in order to influence the public in a certain way. They are being portrayed as misogynistic pigs that are giving birth to young, violent British males who are then going out and generating violence within the community, being violent towards women and girls. And Journman is saying, will the Goyim, will the peasants, will the peons cop on to what is happening? Will they realise that actually the real problem is over here, but the peons, the peasants and the Goyim are being distracted into thinking the problem is here? They are being distracted and deceived into believing that the problem is Andrew Tate and his supporters, when the problem is actually somewhere else. And so long as the Goyim and the peons and the peasants are distracted and deceived, they will then champion and say, yes, we need to crack down on online misogyny. We need to try and get strategies and programs brought into our schools. Remember we were talking about education last night, folks? Oh, to be educated, episode 28. About education. Programs now need to be brought into our state-funded educational institutions in order to convince the young people that Andrew and Tristan Tate should not be listened to. They are misogynistic pigs. They are dangerous individuals that are filling you, the young people, your minds with polluted, contaminated thinking, inaccurate worldviews. And maybe what Journman is saying is that when will the peons, when will the peasants, when will the goyim open their eyes and realise that they are being deceived? And that the problem with violence against women is not to do with Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate and their supporters, but it is actually to do with something else. Maybe that's what Journman is saying with his comment. I don't know exactly, it is speculation. The Bandido cannot be sure. He just has to do his best to try and interpret the live chat. Anyway, let's see who else is in the live chat. I think we had 2 comments. So that was Journman. Let's have a look at our second live chat. It's from Tuco. Tuco's back in the live chat again. It's good to have you back with us, Tuco. Let's see what Tuco say. He says the following. Tate versus Chase, ? Well, we did mention earlier in the episode tonight that Andrew Tate will be fighting tonight. What date is it today? The 20th of December, 2025. So on the 20th of December, 2025, tonight's show, the date of tonight's show, Andrew Tate will be fighting against Chase Demure on Rumble Premium Live. So perhaps what Tuco is asking me is this particular fight between Andrew Tate and Chase Demure. It's part of the Misfits boxing promotion. And so Tuco is perhaps asking the Bandido for his opinion. Who does he think is going to win this fight between Andrew Tate and Chase Demure? Well, look. Andrew Tate, as I've already said, he is a former kickboxing world champion. He has also fought in MMA. He has a very decorated combat history. So he has been involved in the combat game for a long time. He has been very successful in the combat space, particularly in kickboxing. And so here we have Andrew Tate, who is a combat world champion. And then we have Chase Demure, who appeared on, what was the name of that show? Too Hot to Handle. That's right, Chase Demure. His fighting pedigree comes from the reality TV show Too Hot to Handle. It is a dating show. And so Chase Demure has decided in the last few years to try his hand at boxing. And so we have Chase Demure, who has been on Too Hot to Handle, a dating show, who has been engaged in the combat world for the last year or two, against Andrew Tate, former kickboxing world champion who has spent his entire life in the combat world. I wonder who is going to win. Now, some people will say, well, Chase Demure, he's young, he's bigger than Andrew Tate, he's been more active than Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate hasn't fought in 5 years. He's been inactive, but Chase Demure, he's active, he's bigger, he's younger. But then we have Andrew Tate, who has a very decorated record in the combat space. And I understand people will put the argument forward for Chase. The fight has to be sold. People have to be interested. Their eyeballs have to be on the screen, watching the fight on Rumble Premium. And so we have to big the fight up It has to be promoted in a certain way to generate interest, which is fair enough. But in the Bandido's humble opinion, we have one dude, Chase Demure, who has been on a dating show and has been fighting for the last 12 to 24 months or so. And then we have a former kickboxing world champion in Andrew Tate, who has been in the combat space for all of his life. I think if I had to put my money on one of these individuals, I think I might be inclined to put it on Andrew Tate. Just a little bit inclined. Because the record sort of speaks for itself. But maybe the Bandido will have egg on his face. Maybe he won't. But I think it is safe to say, I'm pretty confident saying that I think Andrew Tate will emerge victorious from tonight's fight, Tuco. I don't think there is much doubt in the Bandido's mind. And if the Bandido is wrong, well, oh well. His underlying logic wasn't silly. Because you can hear the logic behind my thought process, behind my prediction. And so even if I am wrong, who gives a shit? There was decent logic. But anyway, I think Andrew Tate is going to win, to answer your question, Tuco. And I think that is our last live chat. Let me just check and make sure that I've got all the live chats. I think that's everything. And so I think that is going to draw tonight's News on the Tube to a close. A good show indeed. We only got through one story. The Bandido got up and going. That can happen. It can happen. All things Andrew and Tristan Tate tonight, folks. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you enjoyed the show, folks, feel free to like the live stream. Your charity is welcome. It is always gratefully received here on Bandido Talks. Of course, if you are watching the episode after the live event has been posted, get down into the comments. Let me know what you thought about everything that we talked about tonight. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Leave it all down in the comments below. And finally, if you like what we are doing here on Bandido Talks, feel free to subscribe to the channel. You will be notified of all of our upcoming live shows, all of our uploads, all of the updates with respect to what it is that we are going to get our Nashers into over the incoming weeks. But anyway, a very good show indeed. We will be back tomorrow night for our final live stream of the week. It will be our Sunday special. We will go down through the most topical news story that is doing the rounds in the news, the hottest news story, the most viewed news story. We will be using AI to tell us what is the most topical news story at the time of our show tomorrow night. That will be our Sunday special. We will sink our teeth into that story tomorrow night. That will be at 7 p.m. Irish time here on YouTube. So feel free to join us tomorrow night for our Sunday special. 7 p.m. here on YouTube. That will be our final live stream of the week, of course. But I hope you enjoyed our News on the Tube tonight. Feel free to join us tomorrow night, folks. And with that all said, it is over and out from the Bandido.